So over the weekend,
Yeah,
this
and
actually
we're
last
going to have
week,
Mike Dawson studio on Wednesday.
on Wednesday, full show, Mike Dawson
Teammate
on
of
Wednesday.
G. Bush in high school and a teammate of Dustin Fox in college.
Yep. So big things coming here for UCSS. Last week, though, Michael Rubin, who used to be part of the 76ers ownership, was on Pardon My Take, which we're big fans of Pardon My Take. They do some really good stuff. And Big Cat asked him, and we're going to play the quote for you so you could hear it exactly, straight up. What is an owner's job and responsibility? And Rubin is as qualified as anyone to answer that question because he was a part owner of the 76ers for a while. I want you guys to listen to his answer. And then we're going to talk about whether or not we think the three Cleveland owners are fitting at least Rubin's description of what an owner should and needs to do to be successful at their position. Steve, roll the clip.
Let's talk about just owners in other sports. The thing that we always struggle with as fans is like why an owner doesn't take every advantage they can to try to put out a championship team, whether it be coaching staff, like where there's not salary cap, right? Coaching staff, facilities. We saw that report with the NFL teams where some teams were getting like an F- in strength and conditioning and stuff. What's the disconnect? Why are people just buying teams and then when they buy the team, they're like, well, I've done my job?
Look, I think different people buy teams for different reasons, different people in different financial situations. I can tell you, if I were a fan, what I would want out of my owner is someone who had one goal, which is to win championships for their city. That's what matters. I could tell you, the Sixers haven't succeeded yet in the 11 years that, the ownership group has owned the team, but that is the only goal that everybody is thinking about. And I think if an owner's not doing that, they're probably not the right person to own the team.
Yeah.
And by the way, look, some people say, look, this is a good business. It's a good investment. It makes money.
It is.
But I got to tell you something. That is secondary. Like, you own a team, you better wake up and go to bed figuring out how to get chipped.
I don't know if I believe him, by the way, that
Didn't give any tangible answer, though.
Yeah, I mean, he just said that all that like winning is the number one priority over business, which I don't believe. I don't actually believe that's true. I think he's being disingenuous because billionaires only care about money.
Well, yes and no. I've been really hard on Dan for years and years and years, but the one thing I'll give him credit for, I've been told by people who don't love him and wouldn't say things just to be nice to him, that he lost $50 million a year they won the championship. That losses out of his pocket, $50 million for the championship. He has always said, one of his isms, money follows, it doesn't lead. Like you have to spend and then recoup later. Now, obviously, the Dolans in town feel very differently about that, and they're in a different tax bracket than what Dan is. But if you're going to ask me, what's the role of ownership? Spend. You have to spend. You have to give your organization every resource and tool that it needs in order to do its job, and then get the hell out of the way. That's the job of ownership.
Well, based on your definition, we don't have any owners that fit that bill in this town.
Agreed.
Because the Cavs and Browns spend, but don't stay out of the way. The Guardians stay out of the way, but don't spend.
Yeah.
So we don't have that. Based on his definition,
I don't even know what his definition is.
I don't even know what his definition is either.
Do everything you can to win.
Well,
okay.
What does that mean? It's very.
I mean, it really is. It comes down to the person, right? You got some that are in it for the investment. They're protecting their share plus the shareholder share, and they're gonna put a little minimum into it. And
they're building generational wealth for themselves.
Right. Then you got some that are just avid fans, still want to win, still want to make some money.
Yeah.
And like when I look at Jerry Jones, he wants to make some money, but he want to be on the top too, right? There's a different mentality.
Yeah.
And then you got some that don't know anything about it at all and just acquired the team because it looked like it was a good investment and know anything about running the organization to win a championship. So it's entirely upon the underlings to figure it out, right? So I think I prefer to be around a person that understands the mission, love of sports, going to tool the team up as much as possible because each market is different, right? You're not going to spend Cleveland like you're going to spend in Dallas. You're not going to spend Dallas like you're going to spend in New York, right? You have more resources to work with.
Well, it depends on the sport. I mean, in baseball, with no salary cap, yes.
I don't care. We could take one of the Cleveland teams, and you're not going to compare that to any other.
The Browns, I think, spent more money actually last year than any team in the NFL.
No, what I said, when I say spending the money, it's just it's everything. It's just not the team.
Sure.
It's developing the thing around.
That's true.
It's making sure the fan experience at the top of it because they want to be on the top. That's what they do. Jerry's World. You ever been to Jerry's World?
No.
Oh, Jerry's World is different.
Right.
Right.
They don't win.
Right.
I mean, they win the regular season.
But they win in Texas because the people in Texas love it.
Yeah.
Right? They love that.
Even though the team hasn't done squat since he's on the team. That
And
matters.
so it's all about what you're trying to achieve. So I've been on some teams before with teams that the ownership didn't know anything about it, right? It was just a toy, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Flying fans on the plane.
These guys make their money in business
Right.
and then come here, and it's fantasy. It's
Yeah.
fantasy baseball,
Right,
fantasy
right.
football come to life. I remember talking to David Griffin when Griff was here, and he had other opportunities before. When he left Phoenix, he had interviews with some other, and he said, like, point blank, I didn't want to go, I'm not going to name the teams, but I'm not going to go there, or there, because going in ownership is not going to spend. And in the NBA, you have to spend. If you're going to win a championship,
Right.
you have to spend. You have to be willing to go to the tax. And there are some owners who refuse to. Oklahoma City fell apart because Clay Bennett didn't want to go into the tax, and therefore they had to trade James Harden.
Right.
Like, they drafted 3 MVPs and never won a championship because they wouldn't spend. You have to spend and spend at a high level. We see what Golden State is doing. Like, Joe Lacob is willing to spend. Now, he's printing money at that new arena, but they're willing to spend so much that the other owner's like, okay, wait a minute, we got to do something here.
Right.
Put some levers in place at the top
Well,
of
and
this.
that's what they're trying to do in baseball, too. I'm sure all the other owners are angry at Steve Cohen, who owns the Mets. But he's like, I want to win.
Yeah.
And if you're a fan, you want your owner to be Steve Cohen because he's going to spend.
He's going to spend.
Now, I don't know if he's a meddler. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
You don't want that either because the known meddlers at owner never have success.
And that's why I think fans can't see the day-to-day. Fans don't see the interactions between the owner and the GM, the owner and the coach, the owner and the players, the emails that get sent. They don't see that. But they can look at payroll.
Yeah.
And they can see who's invested. And that's why I think everyone thinks that Dan has done such a wonderful job here for 20 years as owner of the Cavs because he spends, because he's willing to spend. And I just said, you can't win without spending. It is an unbelievably critical piece to winning. But there's a lot more on the other side that can be just as toxic and damaging to your ownership style as well.
Yes.
And for my money, I still believe, will always believe, the Dolans are the best owners in town. Now, they're not perfect because we talked about the spending component. They don't have that.
Yeah.
But
that's the more as you said.
That's the
it's
public.
the most public.
That's
component.
the public.
And they deserve criticism for not spending enough.
Yeah.
But they deserve credit for the good part of their ownership.
And they do so much more right than they do wrong.
Yes.
And I just feel like it gets overlooked, and it doesn't get as much. People don't pay as much attention to it because it's not as sexy and it's not as.
Whereas
you
Jimmy,
can look at a spreadsheet and see.
And Jimmy has spent for 10 years.
Well, has he? I mean, they keep rolling over the cap over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Like, they really haven't spent a ton. I don't think he's afraid to spend. I think he's tried to be strategic with the cap. Obviously, with the Deshaun contract, he's willing to spend.
But their actual real money spent last year was amongst the highest in the league.
Okay, but go back to 5 years before.
Right, but they didn't have any players to spend on, to be fair. I have no concern about him spending money.
I don't either.
I have concern about everything else about his ownership.
Absolutely.
It's a complete shit show there in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. I mean, there's things like that I know that you know even more than I know, like behind the scenes, it's things we can't even say on the air that are like disgraceful.
Yeah.
I mean, all kinds of horrible stuff and shenanigans. Some of it that's become public with some of the people that have gotten fired. Like they have been a total disaster. He pits people against each other. Everybody goes to him. And maybe he'll smarten up and stop doing that. But yeah, I mean, the best situation is when you have an owner that doesn't meddle but spends unlimited money.
And it's hard.
And it's hard to find an owner like that.
I'll tell you, Kobe Altman to me has the best setup of any Cavs GM since Dan bought the team. He's got all of Dan's money and none of Dan's interference. It's unbelievable compared to what all the other GMs have had to go through that sat in that chair. And it's for awful, horrible reasons. I don't want to make light of it. Like, Dan's medical condition is far different than it was.
Sure.
And that's sad. Like, it's heartbreaking, really. But the reality is, Kobe has access to all of Dan's money and all of the spending without the day-to-day.
Right.
And that's not just me saying that. That's the people who have lived it.
The son's
who've
not
been in the
meddling
building.
at all?
No, he doesn't know. Like, Grant doesn't know. Like, he's still
Well, Dan didn't know either, but he still meddled.
No, but Grant's coming at this from a completely different angle of here's a guy in his young 20s, maybe mid-20s. I don't even think he's mid-20s. I think he's still
28.
No, he's not. He's not that old.
Let's go, Mike. Straighten yourself out over there.
And he's still trying to learn the business side of things. So he doesn't pretend to know everything. And I do think
good.
if he wants this, I do think long term it could be a good thing. But there's a lot he's got to learn.
Yeah, sure.
In a short amount of time.
But
Between
yeah,
his
25. I apologize.
25?
25.
Yeah, I mean, the perfect scenario.
According to an athletic article. So if you're going to be wrong, Jason, that is someone in your
25
building giving me bad information.
25 years
25.
old.
Imagine you owning
Wow.
a team. You're 25 years old. I
Man.
mean, he's not the owner.
Yeah, Dan's still in charge.
Right.
But if he wants it,
Yeah.
that's the part we don't
Right.
know. If he really,
That's crazy.
If he really wants it's either him or they have to sell. There's nobody else in the family.
It's hard to believe that a kid that grew up that rich and is that young and has that much power already is not a spoiled douche.
And he's not.
It's amazing.
It's like
because that
was my first thought.
Yeah.
Before I had to talk to him, before I had any conversation with him, I thought, okay, well, this is going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I talked to people who used to be with the Cavs, who knew him when he was a kid, people that are there now, and they all say what a great unentitled guy he is.
That's awesome.
And like a good dude. Players liked him.
What are the odds of that?
Players liked him.
Yeah.
Front office people liked him. Because he knows what he doesn't know, and he doesn't try and come in as the spoiled bratty rich kid. And
Right.
he wants to learn. But there is so much more to being an NBA owner than just showing up on game day
Right.
and enjoying the contracts, the unhappy players. And
Right.
There's just so much more. The crap side of it. I don't know if he wants it or not, because that's just as big of a piece as the fun stuff, and that's what they have to figure out.
Yeah.
You guys mentioned meddlers. Is Mark Cuban the only meddling owner that has won a championship? I'm trying to think. I can't think of another one in any sport.
Jerry won.
Man, I forgot.
Jerry won in the 80s.
That doesn't count.
Why not?
No, 90s, not 80s.
90s.
Because he had just taken over.
Okay, he still
And Jimmy
won.
Johnson had put together that team. Since he fired Jimmy,
They've had nothing.
They
Yeah.
they had the one championship. They still won, right? With who took over for
Barry
Jimmy?
Switzer.
Barry Switzer, with the team that Jimmy had put together.
Yeah.
And since then they have like 3 or 4 playoff wins. They haven't done anything.
Steinbrenner with the
I
Yankees.
forgot for a second when you said Mark Cuban won a championship. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot they won a championship because they never should have won that year. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Steinbrenner, obviously, he just outspent everybody. He was the
a
ultimate
meddler.
meddler. He was the ultimate meddler.
But that was a time where he was the only guy spending like that at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, listen, I don't know. But it's very rare. Like Jerry Jones hasn't done much. We know with Jimmy. I mean, a lot of these guys that meddle too much.
Mickey Harrison stays out of the way in Miami, and now you look it's incredible what Miami's been able to do. They never fired their coach. They kept everything intact.
Right.
LeBron leaves. They re-sign Chris. Dwayne leaves, and they just get Jimmy Butler, and they build this back up, and they go back to the finals.
Right.
Amazing.